Hello, Year 8. It's Mr. Blackwell from the Geography Department. Today we will be doing climate graphs, which will be Lesson 9 and Lesson 10. So, pause this video, write down the title and today's date, and then resume the video when you're finished. Excellent. So, aims for today and for next lesson is all of you will be able to create a success criteria for what a good graph is. Most of you will be able to complete 2 climate graphs for the Antarctica's climate. Some of you will be able to analyse and explain your climate graphs independently. Brilliant. So, you've all done graphs before. I know that all Year 8 have done a climate graph. This should be your second one this year, this academic year, so you know roughly what you're going to be looking at. So, without looking back in your books just yet, have a look at this and try and find as many issues as you can see just off the top of your head. So, pause this video and count how many problems you can see or how many things could be better. Pause your video, you can make a little note in your book underneath your title, and then we will resume when you're done. Brilliant. So let's have a look to see how many we all managed to find. So, did you all pick up on these? So, let me show you what I found. Here we go. Let's work from left to right. So, first thing we have is precipitation. That's like the level of rainfall or the amount of water being shed in an area. So, we don't know if that's litres, if that's cubic meters, or if that's millimeters. I assume it's millimeters, but there's no measurement, so that's no good. If you're looking at this, you don't know what it means. We'll go around the top like a clock. So, title. There's no title. This doesn't mean anything otherwise, really. Needs a key. Yes, absolutely. I don't know what the blue means, and I don't know what the red means. At the moment, they're just colourful shapes. So you need to explain what that is. So the people who are then going to be reading it or going to be looking at it, so it makes sense. Over on the side, a temperature in degrees, so fantastic. So they've got degrees over here, but they don't have millimetres over there. But it goes 2, 4, no 6, 8, no 10, 12. Not ideal. So we need to be careful that this doesn't happen, otherwise the data won't be represented properly. Here, where you can see the December date, I assume it's December because there's no title saying months. The December date, it's kind of not really in 3, just below 3. So unless the average temperature is about 2.8 degrees, I'm not entirely sure. There's also another one. So where they've added each line, it looks as if they've used a ruler there or they're using individual straight lines. But for this line, they shouldn't be doing that. So in total, there's about 6 issues here, 6 or 7 issues, including it doesn't look like they've used a ruler really to say. So we need to take a little bit of pride in our work. So let's have a look next. Using this information, we can create a success criteria. So let's go through these and then I will get all of you to be copying this down. So at the top, straight lines, really important. You want it to look professional, you want it to look clean, and less mistakes if there's straight lines. A title and labelled axes. So we've just seen if there's no title, we don't know what it means. And if it's not labelled, then we don't know what's on each axis. Evenly spaced bars, that's really important. Today, we're going to be having each bar spaced apart from one another. Each of the bars should be the same width and the same colour to show they're representing the same thing. And are you using a ruler? This is really basic. Even if you don't have a ruler, you can get the edge of a book and you can use that. As long as it's straight, that should be fine. A clear line drawn freehand. Fantastic. That clear line is going to be for the red line we just seen, which will be temperature. And a key. A key is what we needed in the previous graph to show what the red line means and to show what the blue square means. Fantastic. So, can you copy these down in that order? And then later, when we are doing our graphs, we can look back at this as a tick sheet, so we can see, yep, I've done straight lines, fantastic. Title and labeled axes, brilliant. So you can actively come down, tick these off, make sure you've got a good graph. So pause this video, copy this down, and then resume the video when you're finished. Brilliant. Let's move on. So why do we need a climate graph? So a climate graph is a combination of a bar graph and a line graph. So that shows that it's representing two pieces of information or two measurements at one time. So instead of having two completely different graphs, you can have one. So more condensed information in one graph. Temperature is shown on the right-hand side of the graph in red, and rainfall is shown by a bar graph on the left-hand side. So a line graph on the right-hand side in red is for temperature, and rainfall on the left-hand side is a bar graph, and it is blue. Fantastic. So let's have a look at the next one. You don't need to write these down, don't worry about that, we can come back to these. So under this video, this should be attached where you can find it very easily. We have two different data sets, one from Antarctica 1911 and one from Antarctica 2011. And the importance of this is what we did last lesson, is to see the impacts of global warming. And this is where it's going to be put into perspective. It's fantastic. This is going to be something that's going to be really easy for us to compare to two different sets of data visually, and it's going to be applicable to what we have just done. So if you have access to a printer at home, I would print this out and then use each one of these to tick them off as you go along, to make sure, just like in class, you tick them off as you plot them, so then you know you don't accidentally plot the same one multiple times. Fantastic. If you don't have access to a printer, that's no problem. What you want to do is get a piece of scrap paper or loose paper, ideally not in your book, and you want to roughly sketch out one of these data chart, or data chart, and write these down so then you can actively tick them off as well. Fantastic. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. So pause the video, write these down, or print this off so you have it at hand and ready to use. Fantastic. So as you can see here, we will be using two different graphs. So this is going to be 2 lessons worth. In today's lesson, I want you to be finishing the 1911 graph. So let's have a look. On to the next one. So what you need is a piece of graph paper, or you can even do it in your book if you don't have graph paper. I'll see if I can attach some graph paper underneath, so if you do have a printer, you can print that off. If you don't, you can do this in your book, but if you do it in your book, be careful and make sure you do use a ruler or something extremely straight. Take your time, use a pencil, and just do your best. Obviously it won't be perfect, but as long as you try your best, we'll be able to see that. So let's have a look. What you want to do is you want to start with the left-hand side. Instead here, we have it going up to 6, but actually we need it to go up to 7. So keep that in mind. You don't want to start at 0 down here, you want to start at 1. So make sure if you use 4 little blocks going up here from the start all the way up to number 1, you want to be using 4 blocks from number 1 to number 2. If you use 4 blocks from number 2 to number 3, all the way up, fantastic. That means it's uniform, that means it makes sense. The same for if you're plotting this in your book, make sure you're going to be using the same amount of lines for each one. That's fantastic. The same at the bottom. So make sure you've got the 12 little increments, or this 12 little spaces. Make sure there's enough space, because each one of these bar graphs will not be touching next to one another. So January won't be touching February, February won't be touching March. They will be standalone. So keep that in mind when you're plotting it. So make sure you're going down, make sure you're going across, and then once you finish that, we'll move on. So pause the video and then resume the video, and then we'll carry on. Brilliant. So remember, make sure you've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and make sure you haven't done what we've seen in the beginning and someone accidentally going 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. Very easy mistake to make, and we all do it. So, on to the next one. Now, this is what it will end up looking like. So, if it goes all the way up to 7, that height is perfect to be doing exactly the same height on the other side, and then all the way down. But for whatever space you used between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, you want to use half of that space, which would then be the equivalent of 5 degrees on the other side. So that's completely fine. If you used 4 blocks like we did here, you need to use 2 blocks, make a line, 2 blocks, make a line, 2 blocks, make a line. If you did it in your book and over here you use 2 lines, over here you need to use 1. So the left-hand side for precipitation is twice as big on those increments as the right-hand side. If you have any questions about this, type it into the chat and we'll be able to help you with this. If once you have done that, make sure that you've written it down with the right labeling. So remember, precipitation is going to be on the left and temperature will be on the right-hand side. Months at the bottom and at the top. I've got this written down for the 2011 as an example, but the numbers will be exactly the same. So it's still going to go 1 to 7, and it's going to go from 5 to 0 down to minus 60. So it gets super cold. So pause the video, make sure you've got all of these done, and make sure these 2 lines go up to the same height, or the 2 axes. So pause this video, make sure all of this is done, and then we'll carry on. Brilliant. So remember at the top, yours should be saying 1911, not 2011. So you guys should be doing 1911 first, but the grid, the actual outline is completely the same. All of the axes will be labelled exactly the same. It's just the date for the title that will be different. So on to the next one. Here you can see there's been an increase from one to the other. Only slightly. What I've done is I've plotted in the precipitation data. So now you should have your data next to you, so you should be able to look and you should be able to tell whether or not I'm correct, if I'm right, if I'm wrong. I've made some mistakes here. You can see that this 1st January line is a little bit thinner than the February. That's okay. I couldn't get it any closer on an iPad, so it's okay for the time being. There will be a couple of... it's never going to be perfect, but we can try our best. On the top right-hand side, I've got my key. So I've got the red line showing temperature and the blue square showing rainfall. So I've plotted these up. In that first data set, I can see in January there is 4 millimeters rainfall. So I make sure my box isn't touching anywhere else. I make sure my bar graph won't be touching February, right in the middle of that section. I go all the way up and stop on 4 as best I can. And then I follow that procedure. After ticking off January, I go on to February. I find out February, it goes all the way up to 3 millimeters, and then I will tick off February to know I've done February. So now use a ruler. Make sure you're putting in the rainfall data and not the temperature, because this is another easy mistake to make. This is why we should be ticking. And then continue with the video once you finish. So remember, you were using the 1911 data if you're on lesson 9, and if you're on lesson 10, you should be using the 2011 data, and it should look something like this. So pause the video and then resume when you've finished. Fantastic. So let's move on. Make sure you've got your labeling done. Make sure you've got your spacing. Make sure it goes from 5, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, all the way down. Make sure it goes 1 to 7. Make sure you haven't missed out any of the months. The last thing you want is to have to start again once you've nearly finished. So, on to the next one. We're going to be moving on to temperature. So, this looks like a squiggly line. As you can see, it looks a little bit messy, but that's okay. It's still representing data. As you can see where each one of these data points has been entered, if you look at January, it will go all the way up. That X is right in the middle of where that bar would be. So that's exactly where you want it. You don't want it on the side, and you don't want it on the other side. You want it right in the middle of where that bar graph would be. So you can see it in the middle of all of these. Fantastic. So, as you can see, I think in January for 2011, it was minus 12, I believe. So I plotted that right in the middle. I followed it all the way across. I used two hands to do this, followed them all the way across, made sure I plotted it in the right place, and then I ticked off minus 12. In February, I made sure I followed it all the way across, and it was minus 20, and then I ticked it off. So make sure you plot in all 12 of these temperatures before you line them all up like that. And remember, don't use a ruler to line them up, and don't join them to the axes on the end. So pause the video, plot all of them first, and then follow them with a pencil without a ruler, and then resume the video when you're finished. Brilliant, there we go. So your 1911 data should look something similar to this, a little bit different, that's completely fine. And your 2011 data should look very similar to this. So, on to the next piece. Let's have a look. Now, for what you will be doing, if you are doing your 2011 data, it will be here. You need to be doing this for your analysis. And for your 1911 data, you will be doing this. So, I want you to be able to describe what you can see. So the precipitation in Antarctica, let's go back, we can see 7 millimeters as a maximum. That's not very high. So we can say that the precipitation is low throughout the whole year. And with a minimum of, you'll have to go back to your graph, you'll have to find out what the lowest amount of rainfall is, or the lowest amount of precipitation per year. And then you input the number by here. Perfect. Underneath, the temperature changes across the year with a minimum temperature of how many degrees in the month of blah, blah, blah. And in the maximum temperature of how many degrees in which month. Fantastic. If you have finished all of these with enough time, I would suggest that you begin your second graph. So your second graph will be your 2011, and then you will be coming right back to the start, and you will be beginning here again, and it will be exactly the same steps as what we have just done. So remember, if you have any questions or if you need any help, ask the teacher, okay? So now, if you have finished your 1911 data and you have finished plotting your 2011 data, what you will be doing is you'll be coming onto here, and the only difference is you can see on the bottom, I think this changed because. So what you're going to be drawing together is lesson 7, lesson 8, lesson 9, lesson 10. You're going to be coming up with a reason that you believe that the climate has changed, or why you think the weather has become more unpredictable, or why you think it has become, or why it's changed so much. Think back to the processes we've seen. Think back to the greenhouse effect. Think back to the gases that will be increased between the years of 1911, 2011. Talk about all of these points. If you've come short on ideas, you can use the internet. The internet is going to be an excellent guide. It's going to be an excellent resource for you to be able to use to find information. So, if you have finished on your lesson 10, and you have completed, and there's still time left, I suggest you come on to here, and you look back at all of the two graphs, all of the data on both graphs. Make sure you have a title. Make sure all axes are labelled. Make sure there's a key, evenly spaced bars of the same width and colour, and make sure there's a clear line graph point. So make sure there's dots, make sure you've joined it freehand. Really important, because you would be losing marks like that in an exam. Perfect. So once you have finished this success criteria, once you've made sure that all of these are on both of your graphs, once you've ticked all of these off and made sure they're there, you have finished today's lesson. So next lesson will be lesson 11, and I will see you then.